The following contains full spoilers for Final Fantasy XIII-1. Please check the description for more information. Final Fantasy XIII-2. Fragments before. Chapter 3. Friend and Foe. Part 3. It was sunny the next day. Arch-out-step travelers' mornings came early. They had to get back the distance they lost from not being able to move at night as the sun rose. When Snow started walking, the cactuar was naturally right by his side. However, it was an exceptionally fast-moving cactuar. It went something like this. It would run a little bit ahead, stop, wait for Snow to catch up, and then run a little more ahead. Even so, it was fun to have a fellow traveler along on his solitary journey. Maybe Saz talked to the chocobo chick like this too. Along the lines of that, Snow continued to tell the cactuar about what he started talking about last night. Where did we get to? Whatever. I'd left on a journey to find my friend, but suddenly I was at a dead end. For one thing, I didn't have a sliver of a clue at all. It was only Serah who knew that Lightning had suddenly disappeared. Everyone else believed that she had turned to crystal like Vanilla and Fang, or that she had lost her life in Cocoonville. Neither Hope, nor Saz or Dodge, who were all there according to Serah, remembered the conversation with Lightning. There was no doubt about that, because he went to confirm with them right after departing from New Bodom. Now that you mention it, it is strange. I heard rumors saying magic this and magic that, but I guess all I thought was that's how things are. That is what Saz said when Snow ran into him for the first time in ages at the tarmac of the Grand Pulse Cocoon commuter flight route. It might just be me worrying too much, but we'd best be cautious. I know, I'll try and gather the word on the streets too, though it's just the stuff of the commuter route passengers bring on board, so you can't expect it to be too good. And then Saz quietly said, sorry. Looks like I've just left everything to you. What are you talking about, old man? You have your own work, don't you? Snow turned to Dodge, who was playing with the baby chocobo, and said, right? With a grin. The reopening of daycare facilities had, for the most part, been pushed back, so Saz had been allowed to take his child to work. Reconstruction efforts had been continuing for nearly 2 years, but they were still very short on pilots. The increasing number of commuter flights had been a #1 priority, so all sorts of accommodations had been granted to pilots. Although, Saz probably would have insisted that he'd be allowed to take his child to work even if daycare facilities had been reopened. Saz's desires to get back the time they had lost apart, to not be apart even for an instant. They were easily inferred from how he glanced at Dodge. You couldn't say for sure that Saz himself had realized this, but even when he was talking to Snow, he constantly had Dodge in the corner of his eye. It looked like a mother bird trying to protect its baby from any type of harm. Yep, if Daddy doesn't fly his airship, then everyone will be in trouble. Dodge stuck his chest out proudly. He had a nice smile. Dodge's smile on the adorable chocobo chick had become famous among the commuter line passengers. People were starved for things that healed sad hearts and brought them warmth. That's why Pilot Catsroy and Co-Pilot Junior's airship had been so popular that it was always booked to capacity. Right. It's a job that's important for everybody. Gotta give it your best too, Co-Pilot Dodge. Dodge beamed, perhaps delighted to be addressed as a co-pilot. After he patted his head, Snow said his goodbyes to the two and boarded a flight for Palampolum. The next day, judging by the sky, it looked as if it would rain any minute. The fact that all the gray clouds were covering the sky so completely made it all the more gloomy. Nevertheless, the cactuar still moved about energetically. I thought you'd be a little more miserable without the sun. I guess just because you're green doesn't mean you're a plant. He tried to give it some of his food a few times, but the cactuar didn't seem to want to eat anything. Therefore, it wasn't a carnivore or an herbivore, so he thought maybe it photosynthesized like a plant, but that didn't seem to be the case either. So basically you're a monster, huh? What? Don't state the obvious, you say? It wasn't as if it had facial expressions or anything, but somehow Snow had gotten to know what the cactuar was trying to say, without it saying it. No, it could just be something he assumed himself. Now, continuing on with the story, I didn't meet up with Hope until after we went our separate ways on Grand Pulse, but I met with old man Saz every now and then. When they had just moved to New Bodom, they wouldn't have gotten on their feet if not for the help of the cavalry. For example, the shelter house had been supplied by the cavalry. It had originally been a makeshift facility developed as a post for fighting against Pulse. It was fortunate that they were on friendly terms with the former Captain Rigday, who was among the principal members of the provisional government. As a result, when they needed to borrow goods or the need for sheer manpower arose, Snow would go to Cocoon to visit Rigday. Only, he was always in a big hurry every time he visited Palom Polum, so he couldn't imagine taking any detours. The most he did was talk to Saz while he was waiting for the airship, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the time to pay Hope a visit. The Hope he met after 2 years had completely matured into an adult. His cruel days as a lessee that began with the Purge had stolen Hope's childhood. It seemed that humans are creatures that can't turn back once they take a step forward. Even after life had become peaceful again, Hope couldn't return to being a child. Even so, Hope's face carried a surprisingly bright expression. Snow's meaningless worries that maybe becoming a lessee had weighed down on him, or that he would be worrying about this or that, had ended then. Well, of course I couldn't just continue being depressed. There was a mountain of things I had to do. "You still worries about the strangest things," thought Snow as he smiled wryly. The first thing the provisional government did was publicize the truth behind the cause of the Purge. It was imperative that they told all residents of Cocoon that the Menace of Pulse had been nothing but a fabrication of Falci Bartandalus. They couldn't ignore his actions of trying to exterminate the residents of Old Bodom as dangerous people tainted by Pulse. It wasn't only the people of New Bodom whose reputations were restored with the publicizing of the truth. The Pulse lessee, Erba Diavanil and Erba Young Fang, together with Claire Farron, former sergeant of the Guardian Corps Bodom Security Regiment, were exonerated for their deeds of giving up their lives to protect Cocoon. Snow thought that the wording had been a little exaggerated, but it was probably good propaganda for dispelling the fear and hatred of Pulse. If not for that, no matter how long the facilities with Cocoon were frozen, the people might not have ever attempted to go down to Grand Pulse. I wonder how Serah felt listening to the provisional government's announcement. Hope couldn't contain his shock and confusion upon hearing that it could have been that they were mistaken, and Serah was right. No wonder. It had been none other than Hope who had found Lightning's knife beneath the pillar. I didn't even think that Light might have been alive at the time. It was probably because of the circumstances. I was like that too. I didn't think about it at all. You're not one to think about things anyway, replied Hope jokingly. But he immediately put on a serious face and continued. Because the knife fell beneath the pillar, I thought Light had become crystal, or passed away. But if she turned to crystal, then she wouldn't have let go of the knife. Rather, that knife was evidence that Light was fighting elsewhere. I should have known that much. Why hadn't I thought of that these past 2 years? Said Hope, who looked down in shame. It wasn't that you didn't realize. It was that you couldn't realize, wasn't it? Like the very root of our suspicions had disappeared. I guess so. At the very least, it wasn't your fault. Sis. No, Lightning thinks that too. All of a sudden, a dubious look appeared on Hope's face. Lightning? My wedding with Serah is on hold for now, so isn't it weird if I call her Sis? I think so, but I end up calling her Sis anyway. What do you mean it's on hold? Hope furrowed his eyebrows. Did you and Serah have a fight or something? No, nothing like that. Snow denied by shaking his head left and right so vigorously that it looked like it would come right off. There was nothing of the sort, for sure. I decided to have a fresh start. Everything from the beginning. If someone had rewritten their memories, he wanted to add that to the list of things that didn't happen. He was going to make it so that none of the things like Serah feeling anxious all by herself, or her crying from suddenly being separated, had ever even happened, and do everything over from the beginning. He decided to overwrite those memories with happy ones. I didn't just leave Serah behind half-heartedly. I'm going to make her happy no matter what it takes. That's 100% happy without a single cloud in her sky. Snow's insistence instantly put a stunned expression on Hope's face. Really, you never change, do you, Snow? Serah's important too. What's that supposed to mean? Just that, said Hope with a smile. To be continued.